Is it groper or gropper?
A groper. The Europeans call it groper. The family that was in the United States, the Loney's family, called themselves Gropper because it should be Gropper, but in Europe they said Groper, so that's how he came.
You can start.
Okay, today is April 3rd, 2023. We are here with Bruce Groper.
It's okay, either.
Susan Kendall, and we're in Toronto, Canada.
Yes?
Put-
Oh, okay.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
If you can just tell us your name, your age, where you were born.
I am 85. I was born November 3rd, 1937, and in the town of Czernowitz, which is the German way they call it. It is now called Czernowice because they're under Ukrainian rule. Czernowitz was the capital of the of Bukovina, which was a province, and a very cultural, very Jewish, and very cosmopolitan city. There were a lot of Jewish organizations, and the whole atmosphere was. They still, even though they were not Austrians after the First World War, they still kept Austrian their culture and their language, and very much like Vienna, which they also called it Little Vienna. I don't remember too much of what went on before the war because I only know from hearsay from what my parents told me. But I know that we suffered a lot. We did not go for a. We had no. Sorry, we had. We were robbed. We had a ghetto which lasted only over 4 weeks, but it was very bad because they took over like 2 streets which they called the Jewish district, and you can imagine the whole city had to go and find lodging there. It was terrible. The hygiene was non-existent. And a lot of people started to get typhus, which is very dangerous and very catchy. And my father went out and he got on the black market a little can of they called it like, it's gasoline actually. And we had to wash our total body with that to avoid the lice attacking us because they were the carriers of the disease. And luckily we escaped. We didn't get any. We were not very sick with it. But then we went back to our apartment, our home, and they started to take the Jewish people went over to Transnistria, which means that it went over a river, which was called, I think, Transnistria, or an area. And my father's cousin got to know an official. And, you know, for gold, you could buy yourself out sometimes. And they approached this man, and he took us off the list. That were supposed to go to this. It was like a territory that, with no food. It was a wilderness, and most people died there. And we were lucky enough that he took us off. And in retrospect, I think he must have had some decency in him because he could have taken the gold and say, "This is your fate. Go." But he was decent in that respect, and we escaped going. And after that, there was a lot of a lot of difficulties in the city. We were under German rule. We had a curfew, shortages of food, uh, fear, fear wherever and whatever you did. That as a Jew, you were either you were taken to the camp or shot or whatever. And it was very, very difficult for Jewish people there. Um,
What did your family do for a living?
my father had a flour mill, which he had just outside the city. And we were fairly well off. But they robbed us of everything. Luckily, we had a neighbor across the street who was very fond of my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, because he was her Shabbos goy at the time. And he came over and he said, "Come and I'll hide you," because there were bands going around killing Jews. Well, he did hide us in his barn, and luckily they didn't find us. But they went into the house because they knew it was a Jewish house. It was full of things that it belonged to my grandmother before. She had 8 kids. There was everything in that house, and my mother threw a small, like a little aperture in the wall. Saw them carrying out things a whole day. They were just robbing us. And when it quieted down and we were able to go back to the house, it was totally empty.
Do you
And
remember anything that they took? What kind of things?
well, anything. They took furniture, clothing, whatever you have in a house, they took. They had not. Jews had things. They had nothing. So whatever they saw that they needed or wanted, it was for the taking. Was okay. and after that, as I said, we went to the ghetto, and then we lived in fear all the time, and that fear remained in me. I didn't understand what was happening, but the fear I lived because in an atmosphere of constant fear. I became very fearful, and I remember that for years my mother had to stay with me. I wouldn't go to sleep unless the light was on in the room, because I probably thought that in the dark you get taken away or something like that, and that's how we managed to live. But we were lucky then most of our family that did go to Transnistria, mostly they were children my age, younger or older, and they didn't come back. And a lot of the adults died from starvation and from sickness. There were no medicine. My parents had a friend, a doctor. And he said, "I'm so glad that I was a doctor." You know why? Because he could steal a piece of soap, and with that he saved his family, because people did not have not enough water, no, let alone soap. They had no changes in clothing, unless they washed what they wore, they didn't have. So they died from this misery. And starvation was terrible. They tried to set up, I think, a kitchen like for the people outside, I guess, who were in other countries. In the United States, they started to send through organizations things to save us, but a lot of it didn't get there. Or maybe I don't know, maybe it was stolen, but anyways, there was a kitchen, like a for the inmates there, but the food didn't get to them, and it was very, very sad, very sad. From time to time, we used to get this one died and that one died, and it was constant crying and misery.
How were you getting the information?
I think that maybe sometimes they could send a letter through the Red Cross, or maybe sometimes officers would like somebody would approach an officer or somebody, could you tell my family who lives at so and so that so and so died? I imagine that. I'm not sure how they got the news actually, but it filtered through. So there are many stories. That's how we were lucky we survived.
What did you do for food?
For food, well, there used to be the peasants used to have a market. They had a market. So my mother sometimes the way my mother made a living was that she did not look. If you see, I don't know if you see in these pictures, she did not look like a typical Jew. She was blonde, they thought she was a shiksa. And she hid her yellow star to hide it and hope that she would escape. My mother also made some, she was very young, she had no business experience, but she was clever, and she sold things that, Jews needed money. You cannot eat furniture or whatever else. So my mother they would give her certain things, certain household goods and so, and then she would approach the Gentiles and sell it for probably a fraction of what it was worth, but they gave her a certain amount of money, so with that we could live. It was very difficult. But most of the food you got, the peasants would bring things into the city, and they would go maybe from house to house and sell this and sell that, so you needed some money to subside on that. And there are many stories. My grandmother was living with us because my grandfather was just shot on the street. He also tried to hide. My grandmother came to visit us, and because she wanted to help my mother with me, and my grandfather was also in hiding. He got and as he was walking home, when he found out that it was safe to walk home, a patrol of soldiers came and he was shot. So at that point, my grandmother had no home anymore, and she stayed with us. And she looked after me most, and I became very close to her because she looked after me, and my mother was always trying to make a few dollars or money, a little bit of money to be able to sustain us. So
where was your father?
my father, that's another story. My father was taken on forced labor for 3 years.
When?
At the beginning of the war. He and most of the other young Jewish men were taken on for forced labor. It was very difficult because they were building roads, and the young men that he was with were not used to physical labor. A lot of them didn't know how to hold a shovel, and they had a quota to do. And it was very dangerous, and a lot of them dropped. They couldn't keep it to do the quota. My father was lucky because he was physically fit. He always worked outdoors, and he was able to finish the quota. As a matter of fact, he used to help some of them. And he also, peasants used to come at night, because he had a little money, so he could buy whatever they sold, whatever cheese, whatever they sold. He got a little extra to eat because the portions there and the quality of the food was horrible. And he was there for 3 years. He came home for a few weeks, and then they would call him back again. And this happened 3 times. The third time was the war was already over, and it was a terrible confusion. And he was able to run away to Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania. And eventually word got to my mother that he escaped. And we were liberated by the Russians. And for a small time, we could move into Romania because that was already under Russian rule. So we met him after the war there, and we united. But my mother always wanted to come to Canada, because her family, 3 brothers, and as it is, my grandmother had to go a year earlier before we went out of Romania. So she so she met, I forgot what I was going to say, just a minute. Can you stop for a second? Yeah, just keep going. Okay. My mother always wanted, as when she said, if I live the war, I have to go back I have to go to Canada because I have my whole family there. But it took us years. She kept on making application, and we were rejected. Finally, my grandmother got permission, and much to my mother's anxieties, she had to travel by herself to Canada. And came to Canada a year before us. In the meantime, Ben-Gurion made a pact with the Romanians to send out the Jews. I did not know until recently that Israel had to pay for every one of us that came out. And we came to Israel, and as soon as we came to Israel, it was in 1950, so it was right after the War of Independence, and it was very difficult in Israel. It was much confusion, as you know, so many different people from so many different countries and from so many different ways of life. And we finally made an application to go to Canada, and we were approved. And the rest is history. We came to Canada. We were very lucky. Our family was a very close family, and they were very, very happy to have us and helped us a lot. And we thank God we made a life here.
Do you remember what life was like at home, back in Europe, when the Russians took over?
When the Russians took over, it was not as bad as the Germans, but it was a terrible regime. Communism is a terrible regime. And
do you remember, did you go to school?
I went to school. Yeah, yes, I definitely went to school. I went up to grade 6. My father had even though you were not allowed to have private properties or private businesses, he had a very small mill in the small town we lived. And he eked out some kind of a living, but we lived also in constant fear, because if you didn't know who to trust. your best friend could turn against you, and you could be, they said you had whatever, make up a story, and they put you right in jail. And to go into jail there was like writing your life away. And but finally, as I said, we were able to go to Israel, and my parents were very happy in Israel. They had lots of friends. They had, but life was very difficult. And then my mother was, now that she had her mother there and her three brothers, she was very anxious to come here. And
How did you get to Canada?
we got to Canada. We went first to Italy, and from Italy we took a boat to Canada, and my uncles came to see us. We were able to come right to Halifax, and it was.
Do you remember that boat ride?
The boat ride was okay. We got a little sick, but that was nothing because we knew that at the end we were going to go to a country that, we were welcomed by family. Life was good. It was freedom.
So you didn't speak English?
I spoke very little because I started to take lessons when we were in Israel. My mother wanted to prepare me to go back to school. So I had a private teacher who came and she taught me. I knew some, but I learned quickly because I was young. I made friends and so forth. And at first it was very difficult in Canada because my parents worked very hard. And it was a difficult adjustment, but they had friends here, and they had, of course, the family here who were very supportive. And then in 1958, I met Lonely actually before 1958, but we got married in 1958.
What was life like in Canada, in Toronto then?
In Toronto, it was.
Did you go to Jewish schools? Did you go to synagogue?
Yes, in Canada it was good because we had freedom. We had. My parents didn't have much, but whatever they had, they lived. They had friends. My family. It was a normal life. You did not have to live in fear, and to us it looked like, even though like Toronto looked to us, it was not like a cultured and so city, but we had freedom. You could walk the street. My parents were so happy when they heard of a Jew being in the government. We never had that. Schools were open to everyone, even in the best of times in Europe. They had a quota, but the quota was not a quota. No, like medical school or any profession you wanted to study, there was a restriction how many Jews they took into that. So, it was a good life here, and as it is now too, we consider it to be one of the best in the world. So it was okay.
Were you met with any anti-Semitism or racism?
Here? Mm-hmm. Well, now unfortunately there is an increase, and it's difficult for people like us who lived, because we're punished for being a Jew. All of a sudden, it's appearing again. And it's, of course, very sad. Part of the reason why I wanted to say was in my own very small way, I wanted to tell you my story and how disturbed I am by it. And I hope that I leave a better world to my children than what we have experienced. And
do you celebrate traditions? Do you have children?
Yes, I have children. I have this is the generation that they're supposed to learn from. But we have a son and two daughters. Myra, who's a teacher and has three girls, And Bernie, who is a lawyer, he has 4 kids, and various, now they're all working. And the baby is Pearl, who you mentioned, you had heard her name. She works for the museum, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, but up from here. She's mostly a fundraiser and like a liaison officer with the museum.
And let's not forget the 10 grandchildren.
Oh, of course, and the 10 grandchildren, 3 are married, and 5 great-grandchildren.
And what's important for you to share with your grandchildren?
What's important with it? Well, my grandchildren, they know my story more or less. I want them to appreciate the freedom that they have and the opportunities that they have, and God should prevent them from having to go through what we people had to go through.
Is Judaism and traditions important?
Yes, we're traditional Jews. We're very proud Jews, supportive of Israel, because we feel that Israel will keep us strong all over the world. We hope, and it's very dear to us. Yes, and my parents always said they would have stayed in Israel because they knew they could fit in very well, but family was here, so there was no question about it. So they regretted in a way that they, for certain reasons, for very important reasons, they couldn't, but they would have probably settled in Israel. Had they not had the family here, they would have settled in Israel. Yeah.
And when the war was over,
Yeah.
did you move back into the home that you had?
No, we didn't move in to the home. We moved in when the war ended. We lived in a different in Czernowitz, but in a different house. Just we didn't. There were so many enemies there in that. I think they didn't consider, and I think also my mother being alone, just with her mother and me, she felt a little safer in a big city, better in a big city, bigger city than what we were outside. Did we move back? No, and then we didn't want to live under communism at all. It was. Well, it was another hellhole, and we wanted to, that part of the country was gone.
And when you were younger, were they able to teach you any Judaism and traditions while you were in hiding?
Yes. We always kept the Jewish traditions. Shabbos was Shabbos. Even though you couldn't do everything, but you knew it was Shabbos. Then my grandmother was very religious, so she kept us. And Yontif, and so we knew it was Yontif. We couldn't keep all the things that we had then, the food, everything, but we did make an effort to keep our tradition. Never did we consider abandoning Judaism. We always kept as I said, we kept the tradition as much as we could. I remember an incident where it was Simchat Torah, and my father was in a bad mood. He couldn't celebrate, and he didn't want to go to shul. And my grandmother said, "You must go. There is a child here. Hopefully she'll grow up in, and she has to know from these things." And she made him, and I went. I remember sitting on his shoulder because he carried me around. The men dance. He carried me around.
When, was that after the war?
No, that was just at the beginning of the war. I was very small then, but I remember that I was with my father in the And the only regret I have is that my parents suffered so much and sacrificed so much. And my mother always said, I apologized sort of to me that I didn't have a proper childhood. And unfortunately, they did not live to a ripe old age. Both my parents were 73 when they passed away. My father was 73, and my mother as well. 10 years later, because they were 10 years apart. So that was I regret. And to this day, when I have a simcha or something, I miss them. And even though all these years passed, I think of them that they did not have that joy.
Your mother came to Canada.
My mother, my father.
And your
father, yeah. Yeah, my grandmother was here. She lived till my first child was born, so it was nice. And then, as fate was to have it, my father passed away in about half an hour. He had a heart attack, and my mother had 2 years after my father died, she developed cancer. She lived a few years, but then it came back. And that was a big regret for me because I was an only child. My parents never didn't have found an opportunity to bring up, and they would have had other children, but they didn't see, and they always hoped that after this would end, and they would. Well, it didn't end. By the time we came to Canada. My mother had to go to work. It was difficult, and she missed the opportunity. They missed the opportunity, and it was sad for them too. But that's it. But they were happy in Canada. They were happy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but too short. What can we do? This is fate. That's bashert. You understand Yiddish? That's bashert. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that's it.
Do you recall anything else from the war or from what it was like coming here and the difficulties?
Yeah, there were difficulties because I had to learn the language. I had to fit in, make new friends. I missed my friends there. And it was difficult, but I think I adjusted pretty quickly to good things, and so far we've had a good life here. Thank God. I have a good marriage. I have, thank God, very good children, and they're achievers, and so it's okay. It's okay. I still think of what like my mother used to say. You lost your childhood. We had so many plans for you, but this was. Thank God it's over now, and we hope it will be good. I mean, these things will some will straighten out. And some I think we might have problems with all the time. The neighbors in Israel are not going away, and they want this one piece of land. I don't know why we are not allowed to have one little country, but well, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's it. So as far as other things are concerned, there's loads, but I have to, So is that...
Whatever, if you have other stories that you want to tell, or recollections of what life was like?
Well,
what did you do all day when you were in hiding?
In hiding, we sat around a lot, and my mother kept my mouth shut because I was small. A child. We were afraid to make noise, to be heard. So it wasn't much of a good childhood, And yes, we have. I have very bad memories and fears, and probably I'm over anxious because of what happened. But thank God we're alive. That's what bothers me, because we lost a lot of family, mostly children, especially the ones that went to Transnistria, which was a sort of a camp, and no medication, no food. A lot of them my age died, and that was very sad, very sad. And adults and people just didn't get up in the morning because of the hardships that they had to sustain. But that's what it was, and the fact it's very difficult to fathom that there are people that think that we made up a story. I can't understand their thinking. We have so much proof, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. in my small way to teach them that it did.
Do you ever think about why you survived and others didn't?
Oh, of course. I think of myself as being very lucky, of course. And I think of all these people who lost children. And we went to Israel, to Yad Vashem, and a woman, we went to see the memorial to the children, and unfortunately, she collapsed. When she heard all those names, she collapsed. And they told us that they have a room where they take these people, and there's always a doctor in there, because they're afraid they shouldn't have a heart attack, they shouldn't break down. And that's with you always, that feeling. But yes, that's always with you. But we cannot change this, and if we are able to convince more people, then it's worth doing this. And to have other. I'm so emotional now. I can't. Probably after you leave, I'll think of a dozen things that I could have told you. But I think you grasp what went through. I mean, we did not go to Auschwitz. We did not go to which was worse. But we suffered. We suffered very much, and I can't even fathom what happened and the marches, and so we didn't go through all of that. But we suffered, and then we suffered hearing about this one passed away, and this one passed away, and this one, and that's very, very, very disturbing.
Does it affect how you live your life?
Yes, I have recollections sometimes, but most of the time I've adjusted, and we try to strengthen, the Judaism, and the schooling that our children, we try to instill on them. They all know about the Holocaust. They all know what happened. And it's our way of strengthening us, and that's very important to us. The grandchildren all went. So far, every child has graduated from Chat. They went. So they do. We try, and hopefully, I think from how they act, and how the ones that are married already, that they know, and they will hopefully try to instill that into their children as well, and that's all we can hope for.
Thank you. If there's anything else you want to add, or
I'm going to ask Loni.
we can.
Hi, is there anything I can add?
You did very well.
Oh, thank you.
You have to
Tell us
give
about the
it
picture.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
Push
want
up
to
for the
see?
microphone.
Oh,
And also this here.
yeah, there is this, and I have to explain to, because they want to know it, you know, yeah.
Yes.
Are you going, here, you should take, while I take, should I explain them to him now? Yeah,
One second. Okay.
yeah, okay. This is a gift from my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who I spend a lot of time with and who, was very dear to me. Oh, okay. She had a lot of influence on me, on my upbringing. And when I got married, she said, I have nothing to give you, no gift, but I will make you this picture and you will live with with what's written on it. And I want to read it in English so everybody understands. It says, where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is God. And where there is God, there is no need. And I often look at it.
Can you show
Very
us?
dear, yeah. And
Sure.
then here a oh, I should hold it up? Okay. No one will be able to read it, only unless they're German people. Okay? Okay. And then here, if you want to, is my family. You want me to point to every picture? Okay. These are my paternal grandparents. Oh, you want to move this? These are my paternal. Oh, he's okay. No, it's okay. Yeah, these are my paternal grandparents. Am I going too fast? No? Oh, these are my maternal grandparents. This is the grandmother that made the picture for me for my wedding. My mother, when she was 9 years old, and my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. This is my parents' wedding picture. And this is me as a baby. And this is my maternal grandparents, my maternal grandmother, me, my mother and father after the war. This is a picture we sent to the family in Canada. We were still in Romania. They were in Canada. And this is my mother and father at the bar mitzvah of our son. The other side is my husband. It's also, yeah.
That's it?
That's it, yeah. Yeah, do you want to, well, we have the mezuzah, but, the Star of David, but this was not worn by me. I don't remember if children were not wear, so we won't do that, yeah.
Okay.
So do you have enough on this? I don't know. Okay.
Unless you have more to say, we have enough.
I don't know. I probably could think. Ronnie, can you think of something else?
You did very well.
Okay, thanks.